always leans towards the right side of the room. Don't understand it.
They want to be
Someone
closer
should
to
do a
you,
study.
Rabbi.
What?
They want to be
nearer
closer to you,
They've all
Rabbi.
lost their hearing like I have. It doesn't help that sound is dispersed. All right, how are we doing on time? We're on the air? Hello, Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at sea. This was exactly the right audience for that joke. One more generation and that's gone. No one will understand it. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Welcome. We're just having a nice little quiet Shabbat. Just the very special people are here tonight and tuned in. A little Halloween special, even though, of course, Halloween, not a Jewish holiday, but we're gonna get in the spirit. I'll give you a little tour of spooky things in Judaism. They're not that spooky. Let's face it, what other people have said about us is worse than we can say. In any case, our readers tonight are Suzanne Paul, Lonnie Fleischer, Audrey and Gerald Weinberg, who there they are, they're walking in now. Charlie Paul, Melanie Goldberg. And to light our candles in a moment, we will invite Sarah Markowitz. But first, we will turn to our opening reading. As these Shabbat candles that we are about to light give light to all who behold them, so may we by our lives give light to all who behold us, as their brightness reminds us of the generations who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light. Sarah.
Let us endeavor to find still moments, quiet spaces within to refresh ourselves, moments without ceaseless questions or inner debates, when we meditate only on goodness. Let us endeavor to nurture courage, recalling moments of strength. Let us remember days of fortitude and the power that we found. Let us endeavor to turn to light, to feel the warmth of a loving touch, our faces and fingers outstretched alive to each other.
שבת לכו ונלכה, כי את הברכה היא מביאה, בשמחה ברינה ובצהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Shabbat Nikabla.
Shabbat Shalom. It's always wonderful to see all of you. May all who walk the paths of righteousness, who work for the good of humanity, and bear the burdens of others, and who give bread to the hungry, who clothe the naked, and take the friendless into their homes, see the work of their hands endure, and may the seed they sow bring abundant harvest.
Chavetz Chaim, Ohev Yamim, Lirot Tov. Mi Aish, Chavetz Chaim, Ohev Yamim, Ohev Yamim Lirot Tov. Nitzol Lishon Chameira Usvatecha Midaber Mirma Sur Meira Vasei Tov Bakesh Shalom Verot Vehu. Nitzol Lishon Chameira Usvatecha Midaber Mirma Sur Meira Vasei Tov Bakesh Shalom Verot Vehu. Mi Aish Chavetz Chaim, Ohev Yamim, Ohev Yamim, Lirot Tov.
We live in two worlds, the one that is and the other one that might be. Nothing is ordained for us, neither delight nor defeat, neither peace nor war. Life flows, and we must freely choose. We can, if we will, change the world that is.
Into the world that may come to be. Our ancestors expressed this in words that have come down to us through the millennia.
Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from deceitful speech.
Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it.
Let
Justice dwell in the wilderness, righteousness in the fruitful field.
And make that justice roll down as waters, righteousness as a mighty stream.
אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה אז יבואו כבר כולם. אמרו את זה קודם לפניי, זה לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה ננסה מההתחלה. זה קודם, לפניי זה לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם.
Neil deGrasse Tyson wrote, "We are all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, to the rest of the universe atomically. There's as many atoms in a single molecule of your DNA as there are stars in the typical galaxy. We are, each of us, a little universe." Carl Sagan put it this way, "The cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself."
There is to be peace in the world.
There must be peace in the nations.
If there is to be peace in the nations.
There must be peace in the cities.
If there is to be peace in the cities.
There must be peace between neighbors.
If there is to be peace between neighbors.
There must be peace in the home.
If there is to be peace in the home.
There must be peace in the heart.
Say shalom, shalom ba'olam. Na'aseh shalom aleinu ve'akol ha'olam ve'imru shalom. Na'aseh shalom aleinu ve'akol shalom, na'aseh shalom, shalom ba'olam, na'aseh shalom aleinu ve'akol ha'olam ve'imru shalom. In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts to all those who need our love and support, those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight, our well wishes are extended to these members of our community and their loved ones, to Joe Gaydon, Ruthie Goldman, Deborah Luria, and Rabbi Peter Schweitzer. There's someone whom you're thinking about now. We'll share those names. Anybody else on this side over here? Yes. May all who suffer know that they are not alone, that we are there. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a refuah shlema, a complete recovery for the renewal of their bodies and the renewal of their spirits.
Of strength that dwells so deep within us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Shalom. Mekom hakoah betochenu, mekorot habracha me'evrotenu. May those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Shalom.
You can shed tears that they are gone, or you can smile because they have lived. You can close your eyes and pray that he will come back, or you can open your eyes and see all that he has left. Your heart can be empty because you can't see her, or you can be full of the love that you shared. You can turn your back on tomorrow and live yesterday, or you can be happy for tomorrow because of yesterday. You can remember them and only that they are gone, or you can cherish their memory and let it live on. You can cry and close your mind, be empty and turn your back, or you can do what they would want, smile, open your eyes, love, and go on. Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, we continue to mourn the recent death of Annette Seifer. Zichra livracha. We observe the yahrzeits of Dale Boski, Gary Clark, Leonard Fox, Gertrude Gutte-Gaden, Norma Geltner, Samuel Glass, George Alfred Harris, Carolyn Liederman, Faye Weiss-Rubin, Alfred Jack Sellen, Jeff Spellman, and Eli Weinstein. If there's someone whom you're remembering tonight, whom you've lost, whose name you'd like to share, please feel free, beginning on this side. Melanie, yes. Anybody over here? Bobby? Anybody over here on this side? Yehi zichram livracha, we say, may memories of them provide a blessing. May we, as we go through their life, find some measure of solace in those warm and beautiful memories. If you can do so comfortably, please rise as we recite our humanistic interpretation of Kaddish together. Nitkadal v'nitkadash beruach ha'adam. Let us dignify and ennoble all people in the spirit of our shared humanity. Let us acclaim the preciousness of life. Let us show gratitude for life by approaching it with reverence. Let us embrace the whole world, even as we wrestle with its parts. Let us each in our own way take up our share in serving the world and seeking truth. May our commitment to life help us to strengthen healing of spirit and peace of mind. May justice and peace permeate and comfort the house of Israel and all those who dwell on earth. And let us say, Kenyahi, may it be so. Please be seated. We have special musical presentation tonight.
Good evening.
We have some special music.
Good evening. This is the Count. Your wonderful Rabbi Felix has told me to prepare some special music for you. Special spooky music for you. As we explore the spookiness in Judaism. Monsters, demons, witches, and ghosts. As I play this special selection that I've been working on all month for you, see if you can determine where this spooky music comes from. And if you know, you win the prize. Do you know where this spooky music comes from? Alfred Hitchcock.
But it wasn't written for him, was it?
The correct answer is, what is Funeral March of a Marionette by Charles Gounod?
Ah.
Unfortunately, you do not get the prize because you did not say your answer in the form of a question. Blah, blah, blah.
Huh? That is from a Sarah, it is. Yeah, that is indeed. This is probably one of the images that scared me the most as a child. I saw the Broadway production in Miami, and I had nightmares for weeks. But this is the one from Fiddler on the Roof movie. So tonight there's nothing serious about this. Obviously, Jews don't celebrate Halloween, although Bobby's in the colors for it. That's right. But it's not a Jewish holiday. Jews obviously do celebrate Halloween. But I thought it would be fun to take a little tour through the monsters, the demons, the witches, the ghosts, and others that inhabit our tradition. They are not many, but they are there. And some of them you may even recognize as we go through. Arthur, if you'll turn to the next slide. We're going to start with creation. So as it turns out, our creation story in the Torah has predecessors and also points to
some very interesting pagan literature from as long ago as 5,000 years. This isn't so unusual that creation stories and monsters go together. There's a Chinese story about a monster who broke into pieces, and the body of the monster became part of the earth. And Norse tales tell about gods who also killed monsters whose body parts became part of the earth. The Babylonians, who were nearby neighbors of the Israelites, of course, they have their own story of a monster called Tiamat. There's several monster stories like this, and the monsters all get mixed up, but this one, Tiamat, is understood to be the monster of chaos. And in fact, in the Genesis creation story, when it talks about tohu vavohu, there was void and nothingness, and the spirit of El floating over the earth, tohu vavohu is a Hebrew analog to Tiamat. And this may actually have been a little bit of a parody of the creation story from the Babylonians. So let's turn the page. We found out about these creation narratives in 1928 when there was a Ugaritic cache of stories very important to biblical scholars. I talk about them all the time in our class on Saturday morning and other classes that I teach. It was found in Ras Shamra, or Ras El Shamra, way up on the Lebanese coast. And it laid bare parallels between these narratives of Tiamat and Baal. Baal is a big competitor for El. And in the Bible, the worshipers of Baal are always being admonished because the god El, or Yahweh, is very similar. And so the stories are similar. In the Bible, let's turn the page. In the Bible, in addition to conquering Tiamat, there's the story, which is paralleled in those Ugaritic texts, of Baal's conquest of Leviathan, the god of Yam, the god of the sea. This is just one illustration. Not all these illustrations are Jewish. Some of them are, and a lot of them come from Christian literature too. And Leviathan, you can see from the English, the word has made its way into the English language. Leviathan, the big giant monster of the sea that nobody's seen. Here's the story. The club danced from the hand of Baal like an eagle from his fingers. It struck the crown of Prince Yam of sea. Between the eyes of Judge Nahar, his compatriot, the river, Yam collapsed, fell into the earth. Joints quivered and his form crumpled, and mightiest Baal scattered him. This is actually from the tablets, the Ugaritic tablets at Ras El Shamra. I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit hoarse, as you can tell. I discovered it when I was singing, so I'll do the best I can. Let's turn the page. Here's another one. This is a different but related tale. You, Baal, slew Leviathan, the slippery serpent. You made an end of the twisting snake, the tightly coiled with 7 heads. This one only has 1. This didn't come from the same source. I have smitten the twisting snake, the tightly coiled with 7 heads. We'll turn the page then. Now, all of this made its way not just into the book of Genesis, but into the Psalms. These are very pious prayers that are said daily by religious Jews and were probably the prayer book of the ancient temple. And it's referenced there. God's power is cited. You, God, divided the sea, Yam. By your strength, you broke the heads of the dragons in the waters. You broke the head of Leviathan into pieces. You cleaved the fountain in the flood. You dried up mighty rivers. So often people, when they're reading this, they don't understand the polytheistic past, that these are the same kinds of monster stories we find in mythology. People don't talk about what we have as mythology, and much of it is different. It's historiography if you're talking about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But if you're talking about creation, it's absolutely mythology. All right, let's turn over to a few other references, and then we'll get past this monster and look at some more that might be familiar to you. In the book of Job, Job is that poor soul who is punished by God as a test of his faithfulness. And we'll get back to him in a little while. Probably one of the most horrifying books in the Bible, I should say. It was both Rabbi Wine's and my least favorite book. But Harold Kushner managed to turn it into a bestseller with his book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Read it. He talks about a powerless God, that we have to take care of each other. This is not a powerless God. This God, after Job says, how could you do all this to me? What kind of God are you? He says to him, can you draw out Leviathan with a fish hook? In other words, are you so big and so great that you could fish out the monster as if it were a little salmon or something? Can you put a rope in its nose and pierce its jaw with a hook? And on it goes. This is Yahweh in a non-Jewish text, talking out of the wilderness and admonishing Job. It's a terrible story. Let's go to the next slide. People, though, believed it, and other people made money off of it. And so from Ugaritic through Jewish stories right into the 1800s, we find this from an exhibition at something called the Mammoth Missourium near St. Louis, the Hydrarchos, also known as Leviathan. And clearly this person, this group of people, it must have been, made this phony baloney looking skeleton here and sold tickets to it. In 1845, the immense skeleton of the monster exceeds 114 feet in length and weighs 7,500 pounds. This wonderful relic of former times, the sovereign master, greatest monument of all animal creation, was recently discovered by Dr. A.C. Koch in Alabama, of all places. How it got from the Middle East to Alabama, I'll never know. The visitor will be lost in wonder and astonishment. Sorry about the typos. I was literally cutting and pasting it from this poster, where we can imagine him sporting his huge form on the mighty waves. So this is Leviathan, a great Jewish monster, and I think this is our final mention of him. This is from Isaiah. Whoops, sorry, I'm gonna fix something. Got to the next one, he's so good that way. Maybe there's one more. In that day, Yahweh, with his sword and great and strong sword, shall punish Leviathan, even the piercing serpent. When will this be? This is in the end of days. God will slaughter, and Leviathan will finally disappear. Not that we've seen him around very much. And in the rabbinical literature, and this is a Jewish picture, in the rabbinical literature, which describes him as having been created on the 5th day, they also admonish us that we're lucky, because originally God made a male and a female Leviathan, but lest in multiplying the species should destroy the world, he slew the female, put her in a big refrigerator, because he's reserving her flesh for the banquet that will be given to the righteous on the advent of the Mashiach, the Messiah. This is our messianic feast, everybody. Get your forks and knives ready. Now, there's another monster that's mentioned less frequently, named Behemoth. Now, Behemoth is an interesting name to begin with, because it's the plural for Behemah, which simply means beast. So this is the beast that is the equivalent of many, many beasts. Just as Elohim is pluralized and is still singular, sort of the God of gods, this is the beast of beasts. And this is one, and this is a Jewish picture, imaginary notion of what he would have looked like. Here he looks like a big hippopotamus. Fun fact, the most dangerous animal on earth is a hippopotamus. Yes, look it up. In Job again, God talking down to Job, behold now the behemoth, which I made with thee. He eats grass as an ox. Lo now, his strength is in his loins, and his force is in the navel of his belly. He moves his tail like a cedar. It's like a giant tree, his tail. The sinews of his stones are wrapped together. You know what his stones are, right? There's children present, so I'm going to let you figure it out. His bones are as strong pieces of brass. The bones are like the bars of iron. I'm just kidding. I know you're not. Now, what happens at the end of the days? Well, all of our favorite monster movies eventually produce a sequel where the monsters from each movie will fight each other. Godzilla, I thought of Mothra, but Arthur, of course, reminded me of a more famous version, King Kong. And it is said in the rabbinical midrash and the tales that in the end of days, they will interlock with one another and engage in combat. And this is from a comic book. I couldn't find a good picture of this. With his thorns, the behemoth will gore with strength the Leviathan, which will leap to meet him with his fins, with power. Their creator will approach them with his mighty sword, this is God, and slay them both. You never saw that at the end of a Godzilla King Kong movie. God never shows up and just chops off both of their heads. And then from the beautiful skin of the Leviathan, God will construct canopies to shelter the righteous, who will eat the meat of the behemoth and the Leviathan amid great joy and merriment. So apparently this is being saved for us because it's just too yummy for regular times. All right, let's look at a different creature, not a monster. Next slide. This is what we would call in English a cherub or cherub, but in Hebrew it's called a chruv. Try saying that 3 times fast. Now, the Jewish version does not look like this. This is a baby angel that people have come to call a cherub, but these are later borrowed images from the cherubs or the cupids of Hellenistic, of Greek culture. The Jewish and Israelite chruvim are a different kind of animal, sphinx, which refers to something that is half human and half animal. We'll turn the page. So, the chruvim of the Bible are not cute. Sometimes they're not scary, and sometimes they're deadly frightening. We meet the first chruv at the beginning of the Bible in Genesis. After God throws the Jewish people, the Jewish people are already getting thrown out, so that comes out of my mouth normally, throws Adam and Eve out of the garden to make sure no humans get back in. He stations the chruvim, 2 of them, with a fiery revolving sword east of the Garden of Eden, which of course inspired the name of the book, East of Eden, to guard the way. The one on the left is a modern interpretation of this. The one on the right is an older one, and you can see he's got a lion's head, he's got ox's feet, he's got the wings of eagles, and there's 2 of them. There's one next to him from a distance, it's meant to show, and there's the firing sword going round and round, it should be. Chruvim, next one please, also are known to be decorative from other places in the Middle East. And I don't know if this is actually a monster or not, but it's certainly a demon or a weird looking creature. This is the chruv, or these are the chruvim of the Ark of the Covenant. And we learn this from Exodus. When they are told how to make the Ark, it says make 1 chruv on one end and the second chruv on the other. Make the chruvim of one piece with the cover. In other words, they're not attached, they're part of it. At the 2 ends, the chruvim are to have their wings spread upward, overshadowing the cover with them. The chruvim are to face each other, looking toward the cover, and they are really nothing less than little sphinxes. Sphinxes are animal-human combinations. We're familiar with the kinds from Egypt, and this, of course, is just one brand. There's the ones with the lion's face and the ox's body and the other kinds of wings and the human mouth or so forth. This one, kind of sad to talk about, this is an Assyrian sphinx from a temple called Ain Dara in Syria. Unfortunately, it's gone now. This entire temple complex was one of the most important archaeological finds of our time. Because of its resemblance to the ancient temple in Jerusalem, was destroyed in the recent wars. So I actually don't know what exactly happened to this particular sphinx, but I'm not optimistic. And the one on the right is a very accurate reconstruction from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Okay, we'll go to the next one. Another brand of monsters, and these are the subject of a lot, or let's say the grist for a lot of imaginary tales that come out even today, even in modern comic books, modern fantasies. These are the Nephilim. The Nephilim, we don't know what that meant. It speaks to falling from where? Perhaps from the sky. In Genesis 6, we have these 4 weird verses. They don't belong to any other text in the Bible. They're not part of those 4 main sources. There's something that snuck in. that people remembered and wanted to preserve. And it's just this little story. It came about when men began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, that the B'nai Elim, the sons of God, bad translation, it really should be the children of the gods. And this suggests a lot of the mythology that's created even today. I'll tell you about that in a minute. They saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. So these heavenly creatures reproduced with human women. Then Yahweh said, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever, because he is also flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. What that verse is doing in there, we don't know. But the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. They were mighty men who were of old, men of renown. And the word that's used with them is Anakim, giants. Turn the page. They are today imagined in all kinds of ways. Now, this comes more from Hellenistic and Christian interpretations, but it's from Jewish sources. And these are and become the demons that we call the fallen angels. And if you've ever watched any of these spooky shows about Lucifer, the devil, all those kinds of things, you know that these things play very heavily into that mythology. Neil Gaiman, I hope you know who he is. You don't? I'm sorry. Neil Gaiman is one of the most brilliant fantasy writers in the world, a British man responsible for more television shows than you can imagine, including Lucifer, for the amazing Sandman series that's now #1 on Netflix, which arose from a multi-volume graphic novel back in the 1980s, a real genius. He has been responsible for almost single-handedly bringing all this mythology together. He knows the Jewish stuff, he knows the Christian and the Greek stuff, and he mixes it all together. And these are some of the monsters, the fallen angels that appear in his work and in other works like it. All right, we'll go to the next one. The Nephilim are also reported, though, in the Bible in a very important story. When Moses and the children of Israel are wandering through the wilderness, Moses sends spies into the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, to see whether and how they can get in when it's time, what it's like. And these spies come back terrified. Why are they terrified? They've seen the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, the giants. And they say, we became like grasshoppers in our own sight. We were so small and they so large. And this leads to, by the way, their punishment for being scared of these giants. I would be scared. All right, the next one. Let's talk about this. This is called the chariot vision. So if you want to meet a psychotic in the Bible, go to the book of Ezekiel. Because that guy was, well, maybe not psychotic, but perhaps an argument for maybe not legalizing those mushrooms quite as quickly as we seem to be doing it. Because this guy has visions that are bizarre. And some of these visions are of God on this weird chariot with wheels within wheels, and this animal pulling the chariot from the sky. It's a fiery chariot. This doesn't really illustrate how weird it is because it's a woodcut from medieval times, but you can see that it has different heads, an eagle, there's a lion, I think, on there, a wolf, and a human. And there's Yahweh with this golden orb and scepter, very much like current monarchs hold, that's above all of these. Let's look at the next one. Here's a better illustration, and I think a far scarier one, of what this monster looked like that was pulling the chariot with the wings. He says, I won't read the whole thing, but he says, I looked, and a stormy wind came out of the north, and out of the midst came the likeness of 4 living creatures. They had the likeness of a man. Every one had 4 faces. Every one of them had 4 wings, and their feet were straight feet, and the sole of their feet was the sole of a calf's foot. And they sparkled like the color of burnished brass, and they had the hands of a man under their wings on their 4 sides. Their wings were joined one to another. They turned not when they went. They went every one straight forward. It was frightening. We'll go to the next one. And here you get a sense of the fieriness, the face of a man, the face of a lion on the right side, the face of an ox on the left side, the face of an eagle, and there's the wheels inside wheels as well. This was a horrifying vision. All right, let's turn the page now and look at a major character in Job that we didn't talk about yet, but he's the one who sets it all in motion. Now, Judaism is given credit for inventing the character of Satan, but Satan is not really featured heavily in our Bible. A couple of mentions. The only place where he's really a main character, and only at the beginning, is in the book of Job. Properly, he should be called Satan, and he is not the scary Lucifer type, which we'll talk about in a minute, but he is a very different kind of character. He's an angel who works for God. Now, the angels are, in Jewish literature, and particularly in the Bible, creatures without free will. They do what they were made to do. They can't decide to do something else. They are messengers from God, and at times, and this was really a way of transposing ancient stories that had all kinds of pantheons surrounding God, surrounding El or Yahweh, where he was sort of the head, like Zeus on Olympus. They would transform these verses to really being about a circle of angels who advise him. It was a way of monotheizing, turning into one God, what were really retinues of several gods. Once that happens, Satan, his role becomes prosecuting attorney. It's his job to point out the flaws in people so that God can judge them. He doesn't take joy in this. He doesn't do it because it's fun. He does it because this is the job he was given and he can't do anything else. So in this picture, which kind of makes it look like he's fallen, because this is a Christian picture, and they want to associate him with Lucifer, but he's really not Lucifer. But I picked this picture because I couldn't find a lot of others, and because of the retinue that you see of the angels at the top. And the way the book of Job starts, the reason why God visits all these unearned punishments on the poor guy to test his faith is because of Satan. One day, the heavenly beings, and in the original, these were probably other gods, but here they're angels, came to present themselves before Yahweh, and Satan also came along with them. Yahweh said to Satan, and I say Yahweh because that's the proper name of the Lord. These are all meant to sort of erase the fact that there are several gods in the Bible that all get smushed together into one. Yahweh said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered Yahweh, "From going to and fro on the earth, from walking up and down in it." Yahweh said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" He's very proud of Job. Job is the most pious man on earth. And by the way, this story probably is not Jewish even in its origins. It seems like it was a couple of stories lifted out of other literature sewn together to make a Jewish point later on, or an Israelite point. So he says, "Have you considered my servant Job? There's no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil." Satan answered Yahweh, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a fence around him and his house and all that he has on every side?" In other words, of course he loves you. He lives in a giant mansion. He's rich as anything. And then he says, "But if you took that all away from him, if you made him suffer, let's see if he'd still be loyal to you." And the upshot of the story is that his friends come and tell him it's all his fault. He doesn't hold by it. And you can read the rest of that book on your own. But Satan was just doing his job. He is not this guy. This, by the way, from the Netflix television show Lucifer, which if you were paying attention, I have some friends who watch this show, you would have seen based on the characters created by Neil Gaiman for Sandman. This is really a wonderful story. They took Satan and the imagery of the fallen angels, the Nephilim, and Hellenized it based upon the Latin translation of verses in the Bible that had nothing to do with any of them. But that was very common. Jews did that and Christians did that. We pulled verses out of context to prove things, because the Bible's not just a set of stories, it also has secret codes in it and also things that you're allowed to read out of context. Where did they get this from? Well, you may remember, Paul, do you remember his last name in the show? Morningstar. So Lucifer, which is a Greek or Latin name, I think Latin, is identified as the morning star. Isaiah in chapter 14, addressing a Babylonian king, says this, shining morning star. He's talking to a guy who's been built up, and now he's about to fall. This is when the Persians conquered Babylon. And that's what enabled the Jews to return from Babylonian exile in the 5th century BCE to go back to Israel, which many of them did. So he's simply talking to this guy and making fun of him. He says, shining Hallel, which is the word for the morning star. It's Venus, by the way. The morning star, if you didn't know, is Venus. And he's comparing him to Venus. You shine like Venus. Now you've fallen from the heaven, you destroyer of nations. You have been cut down to the ground. You said to yourself, I will ascend to the heavens. I will set up my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of the God's assembly in the remotest parts of the north. I will ascend above the highest clouds. I will make myself like the Most High, but you will be brought down to Sheol. That just means to death, into the deepest regions of the pit. So this had nothing to do with Satan, with Nephilim, or with anything else. But once it got into Latin and they put it into a stew of spooky, what popped out was the idea of Lucifer being Satan, and his name, the morning star, and that he is indeed a fallen angel. You've all heard this mythology, right? Lucifer is the fallen angel. So this is where it comes from. And Neil Gaiman, of course, borrows it for his television shows and his comic books, but it goes back much further than this, part of Christian mysticism to this day. Let's turn to witchcraft. Now, witchcraft, though I am told that there are some women who, in a very protesting kind of way, observe witchcraft in the Jewish community. I don't know a lot about them, but it is absolutely forbidden in the Bible. 3 places in the Torah, death is the punishment for witchcraft. Leviticus, don't eat the blood of any animal. That's a separate commandment. Don't practice any kind of witchcraft. And Deuteronomy, don't use any kind of magic or witchcraft to tell fortunes or to cast spells or to talk with the spirits of the dead. Interesting, given what we know about some Jewish mysticism. We even talked about this in our Monday class a few weeks ago, where there is this idea of communicating with the spirits. And I know plenty of Jews, including religious Jews, I mean Orthodox Jews, who pay a lot of attention to astrology, which of course is silly, and fortune telling. They also go to fortune tellers and psychics. Arthur and I were downtown Royal Oak the other day, and we walked past a building and it said, ring here for the psychic. And I thought, why? Okay, the next page. Nevertheless, we do have a famous story about none other than King Saul in his darkest days. Those of you on Saturday morning, we've been reading these stories for quite a long time, and we spent some time on this one. King Saul in his darkest days, a person who is known in the Bible as the woman of Endor, but who comes to be known in literature and in translation as the Witch of Endor. That name ring a bell? You may not know the woman of Endor, but you probably do know the Witch of Endor, as English has corrupted it. And the ghost of Samuel the prophet, the first prophet, the first prophet after Moses. Okay, here's the story. The Philistines, the enemy that King Saul was losing badly to, set up camp. Saul took one look at the Philistine army and started shaking with fear. So he asked Yahweh what to do, but Yahweh would not answer, either in a dream or by a priest or a prophet. Then Saul told his officers, find me a woman, meaning a witch, a practitioner, who can talk to the spirits of the dead. I'll go to her and find out what's going to happen. That night, Saul put on different clothing so no one would recognize him, because he knew this was forbidden. Then he and 2 of his men went to the woman and asked, will you bring up the ghost of someone for us? The woman said, "Why are you trying to trick me and get me killed? You know King Saul has gotten rid of everyone who talks to the spirits of the dead." He had enforced this law so well that there was almost no one left to do it. He knew where to go. Saul replied, "I swear by Yahweh that nothing will happen to you because of this." Something will, however, happen to Saul. "Who do you want me to bring up?" she asked. "Bring up the ghost of Samuel," he answered. A little suspense there. When the woman saw Samuel, she screamed. Then she turned to Saul and said, "You've tricked me. You're the king." "Don't be afraid," Saul replied. "Just tell me what you see." She answered, "I see a spirit rising up out of the ground." "What does it look like?" "It looks like an old man wearing a robe." Saul knew it was Samuel. Samuel had been the one to anoint him. He was now dead, but he was his mentor. He was his supporter. So he bowed down to him. "Why are you bothering me by bringing me up like this?" Samuel asked. And then the punishment, of course, for Saul, among other things, was losing his kingdom and ultimately his life. Let's turn the page. The Talmud has a lot of wonderful little stories about ghosts. This is a very little story, and the only illustration I could really find was again from Fiddler on the Roof. Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yonatan were once walking about in a cemetery, and the blue fringe of Rabbi Yonatan was trailing on the ground, talking about his talus. He was, and you're not supposed to trail your talus on the ground, but he was sort of lazily and absent-mindedly trailing it on the ground. Rabbi Chia said to him, "Lift it up." Why? Because of a superstition. So they, the dead, should not say, "Tomorrow they are coming to join us, and today they are insulting us," by dragging their talus over their graves so haphazardly. So they did believe in ghosts. This is what I call ghost gossip. It was related that a certain pious man gave a dinar coin, a measure of money, to a poor man on the eve of Rosh Hashanah in a year of drought. And as a result, his wife argued with him. This was his last dinar, probably. He went to spend the night in the cemetery. He's not important, by the way. What he saw was important. And he heard two spirits conversing with one another. One said to the other, "My friend, come wander about the world and let us hear from behind the curtain what suffering is coming upon the world." The other responded, "I am not able because I am buried in matting of reeds." So apparently they're a little corporeal. He's stuck. He can't get out of the ground. He's stuck in the reeds that are growing in the ground. Do you understand the imagery? His corpse has a plant growing through it. So his spirit can't lift up from it. This is pretty good, spooky stuff. "But you go, and whatever you hear, tell me." So the one went and wandered about and returned. His companion said, "My friend, what have you heard from behind the curtain?" The other replied, "I heard that whoever plants after the first rainfall will have his crops smitten by hail." Having overheard this, that pious man went and did not sow until after the second rainfall, and everyone else's crop was smitten, and his was not. The moral of the story is, you want to know how your crops are going to do, you need to spend the night in a cemetery. All right, next page. It appears that many Jews believed in actual ghosts. This is one of the latest texts I have. This is from a very famous rabbi, Bachia, from the 11th century, now, our 11th, our side. And he's very matter-of-factly in a commentary on a parsha, a portion that's read during the week from the Torah each week, of Vayechi. And he says, "The ethereal body in which the soul is clothed has substance, but is extremely fine. In this way, it sometimes appears in the form of a body. For example, from Shabbat Eve to Shabbat Eve, or from Yom Kippur to Yom Kippur. It floats around in the world according to the will of God and appears to whoever it chooses." So here's a rabbi from about 1,000 years ago believing in ghosts. The Kabbalah, of course, the next slide, has many ghosts. This is from the Zohar. The Zohar was written in the 13th century CE, but is attributed to a rabbi from the 2nd century CE. All the souls that exist since the creation of the world are present before God, even before they come into this world. just as they appear when they come into this world in the body of a person, just as the body appears in the world, so the soul appears in front of God. And this is what they accredit to being the ghost. The next one. All right, just a couple more that we'll finish up with. This is Lilith. Lilith, something in English, Lilith. Now, Lilith is not originally from Israelite or Jewish tradition. She originated in the ancient Near East. She was a wilderness spirit in Sumerian tales known as the Dark Maid, going back 5,000 years. In a tablet from about 2,600 years ago at Arslan Tash in Syria, there's an inscription that describes her, "O flyer in a dark chamber, go away at once, O Lilith." Next slide. Now, in Hebrew culture, we encounter her first about 2,100 years ago, in the first 1,900 years ago, in the first century CE, in a bowl that was cracked that appears to have been created for a ritual purpose. It says, in part, in the Hebrew, "Designated is this bowl for the sealing of the house of Gionai bar Mamai, that there flee from him the evil Lilith." This is an exorcism bowl. They write the curses and they write the blessings on it, and they break it to release the spirit of Lilith. And this is absolutely from the rabbinical times, from Judaism, not just ancient Israelite. The next slide. Jewish tradition also views her as a seductress. Now, in order to understand this, you have to remember that there are really two creation tales in the Bible. The older of the two is Genesis number 2, Genesis chapter 2. That's the one with Adam and Eve. The one that we placed before it is a much newer tale, but because it's the cosmic, I always teach it like this. It starts out from like the sky, and then we merged it with the other tale so that it was almost cinematic, the way that it's read. But in the earlier tale, which is on the first day God created, and the second day and all of that, on the sixth day we read that God created humanity in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. And this seems to contradict the other older story, but they didn't know it was older, of Eve being created from the rib of Adam. In this one, it seems to be talking about more of what Plato described, which was an androgynous ball of human, half female and half male, that then was split into two evenly. The rabbi said, yes, that was the first wife. The first wife was equal to the man. And because of that, she deceived him. And ultimately was turned into a demon and a seductress. Turn the page. In the Talmud, she becomes a figure of uncontrolled sexuality. This is a commandment given in the Talmud from the tractate Shabbat. It is forbidden for a man to sleep alone in a house, lest Lilith get hold of him. Lilith is said to fertilize herself with male sperm to give birth to other demons. So if you see a demon, gentlemen, walking around who looks a little like you perhaps should not have spent that night alone at your house, because you really weren't. Lilith is also seen in later Jewish literature as a baby killer. From the day a child is born, it is taught the alphabet of Ben Sira, which is an obscure work, until the 8th day. What is the 8th day? Circumcision. I have dominion over the child, and from the 8th day onward, I have no dominion over him if he is a boy. But if a girl, I rule over her 12 days. So be careful. Now, Lilith, as Lilith, has become quite a hero in our day, as a famous Jewish feminist magazine named after her, Lilith. And here you can see that one's on the right. That's just an issue. Judith Plasko wrote or edited a book called The Coming of Lilith, Essays on Feminism, Judaism, and Sexual Ethics, from 1972 to 2003. She's a great conservative Jewish scholar. So I did not want to leave Lilith on a bad note, because Lilith, as she is understood today, is a very important and empowering symbol. All right, the next page. You have two more demons. This, of course, you've heard of, Dybbuk. The Dybbuk. The Dybbuk, the word comes from the word to attach, like glue. It is the life energy when it has been released from someone and goes to the wrong source. Basically, it's possession. It's possession by a lost or troubled soul, just like the possession in that movie, The Exorcist. And the Dybbuk was kind of an early example of that. This is from the movie, the Yiddish movie made in America, based upon the 1920 play by S. Ansky called The Dybbuk, which described how the soul of a betrayed man came back to haunt the body of the woman to whom he had been engaged. Indeed, there he is, very famous, Der Dybbuk, it says at the bottom. And finally, we have the Golem. Now, the Golem, a Jewish tale, is actually the inspiration for Frankenstein. It's an artificial life form invented, in this case, not to present, I think, as in Mary Shelley's book and in all the other literature, to bring life to the dead, but in this case, to protect the Jews. Let's turn the page. Usually viewed as something made of clay, with the word emet, meaning truth, emes, meaning truth, either on the forehead or sometimes burning in the mouth. And this heroic, sort of an anti-hero, is seen to save, was created to save the Jewish community from persecution, death, enacting the kind of heroism or revenge that was unavailable to powerless Jews. So it's a fantasy of revenge and of protection. And it was most famous in the following slide, in the legend of the Golem of Prague. The legend of Golem of Prague was told by Rabbi Yehuda Lev of Prague, very famous rabbi known as the Maharal, was told of him, who is said to have created a golem in order to protect and defend the Jewish community from anti-Semitic attacks. But eventually, just as happens in Frankenstein, and Mary Shelley knew this legend, the golem grows fearsome and violent, and ultimately Rabbi Lev is forced to destroy it. Legends remained, however, for generations to this day, but the golem's body was kept in a coffin in the Altneuschule, turn the page, in the Altneuschule in Prague. And indeed, this is one of my favorite books, by the way. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It was a Pulitzer Prize winning book. It's really about the origins of the comics industry in America, but it's how the Jews essentially invented comics. It's fictionalized, and of course, Michael Chabon, a brilliant writer, but he brings in, at the very beginning, a character who interacts with, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, steals the body of the golem from the Altneuschule, which, by the way, is still standing in the Czech Republic. That, ladies and gentlemen, oh no, there's one more, sorry. The next one, you may have noticed I left out vampires for good reason. Jews have no legends of vampires. The last thing Jews were going to invent was a story about drinking someone's blood, because that, of course, is the canard that was thrown at us. And by the way, if you are not aware of this blood libel's currency today, go look up, what's her name? Lara Logan, I believe is her name. She used to be a reporter for CBS in 60 Minutes. The woman has lost her mind. She's on these fringe television stations talking about hundreds of thousands of children missing in the United States every year because the elitists are robbing them, are taking them so that they can drink their blood and stay young. And you know what she means by elitists, right? There are no elitists that don't include Jews. This is happening right now. The blood libel has been around for thousands of years, notably and horrifically in York, in England, in the 12th century, where the Jews were locked into a tower there, and that set aflame for the sin of killing a boy not to get young and beautiful, but to make their matzah. So we don't have vampires. Jews would stay away from that one and that legend, except in anti-Semitic literature. And here, of course, is a picture of a vampire, and I bet you can guess what country and what era this comes. Anyway, sorry about that. I love vampire tales when they're told right, but not when they're told anti-Semitically. And that's it. Turn the slide. Happy Halloween from Frumasara. All righty. We're gonna just give you a little bit of update as I transition back to the front. What's coming up? So next week I will be away, and Melanie will be here. She's going to talk about mindfulness. Is it for you? What's it about? And I think she'll do a great job. She knows a lot about this topic, and it's something I mentioned briefly on Yom Kippur when I was talking about, was it Yom Kippur? No, I think it might have been Rosh Hashanah when I was talking about fear. So there's that to look forward to. On November 11th, I will be back and I'll be reviewing Starry Messenger, a new book by Neil deGrasse Tyson, in which he applies, as his mentor Carl Sagan used to, the lessons of looking at the universe to the problems we're having down here on Earth. And as you can imagine, it's a very similar kind of point of view of his mentor, a reminder that, you know, we're all we have. So I look forward to that. We will conclude now. These lyrics have changed about 17 times since I started revising them, but we'll do our best. I think this is the one with the blessing and the not the future. I don't know. Somebody talked me into changing them once, and I did, and then I didn't like them, and I changed them back. So depends on where we are in the history of Jeff and the temple. Maestro.
So we're singing blessing this time.
Now we're singing blessings. Whatever it says up there.
May we know peace as we go on our way. May we be guided by love. May we be blessed with health and joy. May this be our blessing. Shalom.
Thank you to Joseph. Thank you, David, who does our streaming, to Arthur for the slides, to Melanie for everything else, and to all of you. Shabbat Shalom.